In Transformer version 1.5, you can now edit across multiple terrains at once. So first off, you will need to create multiple terrains next to each other. And there's a built-in way to do that now. So if you go Game Object, 3D Object, Create Terrain Grid, there's this dialog that pops up, and you can, change the grid to be however you want it to, cut little parts out, change the setting per terrain, and even see an estimated size of how big the terrain asset will be. This does not take into account if you're adding textures or rocks and stuff to your terrain, it'll become bigger. In the future, it'll reflect that, but for now it doesn't. So I'll just leave it with all of them active, and I've actually already created this terrain grid. So here it is. It creates this root object with terrain grid, and inside of it, each individual terrain. So that, if I just raise this one up, you can see that's one single terrain right there. And you can see with Unity's built-in tools, I can only paint in that one terrain. It gets cut off after that. So if I was add Transformer to the root object, I can paint across the entire grid. I'll go back to raise lower, and now I can actually paint across the entire grid. And you can see, for example, if I raise up this here, that's one single terrain, and you can see how it's actually painting across multiple of them, or sculpting in this case more like, across multiple terrains. And you can see sometimes there's this incorrect shading happening, and that's because you need to have something that calls set neighbors on the terrain component, and the create terrain grid dialog actually adds that component there for you and automatically assigns its neighbors to it. So when I press play, you'll maybe notice, the shading here was fixed up when I went into play mode. You can see here, keep your eyes in this part where the mouse is. Another new thing inside Transformer version 1.5 is the paint texture tool. So you can add I'll add this grass texture, and then I'll add a dirt texture. And you can paint across the entire terrain grid like this, and you can, I'll show it again, see how this is one single terrain, and I'm painting across multiple of them. And something to keep in mind when you're using the new multi-terrain system is that currently, if you change anything in the built-in terrain tools, like the settings here, if you change anything in here, it's only going to affect the one single terrain you have selected. But in Terrainformer, these settings will always change every single object in the terrain grid. So even the size, it'll intelligently resize it all and center it back into where the middle of the grid was. So I hope you enjoyed this quick little showing of what you can do in Transformer version 1.5. You can find it on the Unity Asset Store, and the link will be in the description below.